Good morning. This is Wednesday, April 26th. We have just finished as a county council meeting as the Board on Health, and that began at 8:30 and has just concluded 2 hours later. So now we turn to a work session that is the Development and Engineering Advisory Board 2023 Work Plan. And I don't know who is going to kick this off. Would that be you, Kathleen?
Sure.
Go
we
for it.
have we have some guests this morning joining us, members of DEEB who will be presenting, I believe, we're doing the annual report for 2022 and the work plan for 2023. So I'll hand it over to our customers or partners this morning.
Good morning, Council. For the record, Jamie Housley with the law firm of Jordan Ramus. I was the chair in 2022, and I will be discussing the accomplishments that we had in 2022 and then turning it over to my colleague Seth Holling from AKS to discuss our work plan in 2023. But before I begin, first of all, I would like to acknowledge the other DEEB members that are here present and then one member of the public that attends every one of our meetings. So behind me, we have Mike Odrin with Olson Engineering, a division of McKay Esposito. We have Ryan Wilson with Wilson Architects. We have Eric Galimo with SGA, and Eric has been a DEEB member since about 2007. And then we have Houston Aho with Aho Construction, and he's the member, or a guest member that always attends. So just a little bit of history about DEEB, because I do know that we have 3 new members of the council here, and I think that this would be a good time to learn a little bit more about our role in the community. We were founded in 2006, and I view DEEB as a very positive example of a public-private partnership that, I do work in about 50 communities in both Oregon and Washington. I think DEEB plays a very unique role in that it really tries to bring the private sector and public sector together to have a dialogue and to try to find those stress points in process or code that create slowdown or create cost to the public. And we try to work on solutions collectively to streamline stuff and make things better. As Mike astutely pointed out to us, we are the boots on the ground that we're working through the process, working through projects, and understand where those push points may be. We view ourselves as providing solutions, and there's, as you can see by the roster here, as well as a new member that'll be coming on, we come from a variety of professional services, and we dedicate our valuable time not only into preparing for the meetings, attending the meetings, attending subcommittee meetings, but also reaching out to the stakeholders that we represent to inform them of things that may be going on here at the county and to try to help them in their working through the processes. Calculating that on, I think, a dollar amount based upon just our folks up there, it's got to be in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that we're providing in service to the county to try to make things better. And I think an important question is why do we do this? The DEEB members do this not to be self-serving. As a matter of process, I think having things be slower actually probably makes us more money, as a matter of fact, and having more morass, because we're the only ones that would effectively know how to work through that complexity. But we're here really to build our community, do it in a much stronger fashion, do it in an efficient fashion, and make sure that we're providing housing that's affordable and make sure that we're providing jobs out there for our citizens. The other thing I would astutely point out with DEEB, in the past we kind of flip-flop between both an active and a reactive kind of agenda. And oftentimes the active part of this comes from directive from council, where you guys essentially have a conversation with us and say, we would like you, Deeb, to come up with things that we think is important from a policy standpoint. And we really push that in our work agenda and actively try to go out and find solutions. Then there's the other side of us, which is the reactive side. And the reactive side is the side of us that either we are responding to things that are mandated by the state of Washington, such as updates to critical areas ordinances, shoreline ordinances, stormwater, stuff like that, but also times we're reacting to changes in policy that have been, that have come from staff. And as somebody that has served on here, not as long as Eric, but since 2009, it sort of flip-flops, I think, between the active and reactive years, and 2023 or 2022 to me would be characterized as a reactive year. With the exception of one item, which I'll discuss a little bit. So in reviewing 2022, one of the first things that I want to acknowledge is it was since the time of COVID, Deeb had moved to a virtual setting, but beginning in May of 2022, we moved to our first hybrid meeting approach, which I think was really positive. You know, the Deeb members, I always say this to my fellow colleagues, it is my favorite meeting of the month, and I honestly mean that. Because I get to see people that I work with in a professional capacity, as well as county staff that I work with in a professional capacity, and we can have that really good, frank dialogue about how to make things better. And it's just a pleasure. It's been a real pleasure to return to in-person meetings, to be able to see folks directly and have sort of that social interaction time that happens naturally before and after meetings. And so with May, we began both that in-person, but had that hybrid approach as, you know, we're conducting here today. It's done with Teams, and so it's not been without its challenges, I'll say. Sometimes our audio is a little bit off in the room, and so we've been working through that, but we understand that that's probably going to be the way of the future going forward. And quite honestly, I do think it's important because we have gotten better participation from Deeb members that have been away on vacation. They will still make time to attend the meeting. We've got great participation from county staff as well that may have not attended meetings in person, as well as additional members from the public. And so I do want to commend the move back to the hybrid setting. So returning to the 2023 or 2022 accomplishments, one of the first things we brought on early in the year was discussing the housing options task force that were both going on in Clark County and the City of Vancouver. And we actually had both the county and City of Vancouver come to Deeb, and they provided us with a review of what their proposed plans were. And Deeb not only participated in the county's plan through subcommittee action, but we made various recommendations that were not considered in that plan. And again, hopefully some of those items will be addressed going forward. And again, that comes from our realistic view of boots on the ground and seeing what works not only in Clark County and barriers to provide housing there, but as well as the work that our consultants do in other jurisdictions in Southwest Washington and around the region. That was a very important task that we did, and I view that one as more of a reactive function. One of the other things that we spent a lot of time dealing with in 2022 was the landscape buffers in the multifamily zone. And that item came to us primarily as a reactive item because of a change in policy from county staff. I believe that they were trying to harmonize differing decisions over the years, and they came up with an interpretation that effectively was inconsistent from DEEB's point of view with how other projects had been deemed, and there was other projects that would be impacted by that. And to that matter, DEEB, actively pursued an interim ordinance with the county council to try to resolve that. And obviously that discussion is ongoing, and hopefully there'll be a new ordinance as part of the 2023 biennial updates to resolve that. And so that was an item that, again, it was brought to DEEB through staff action, but DEEB in essence became active in that function because of the importance it played on affordable housing and making sure that we were developing properties to the maximum utility possible. DEEB also continued to work with county staff on streamlining customer service, including providing direct feedback on the electronic plan review, and again, worked with the county on its continuing efforts to streamline stormwater review for single-family houses. We then also addressed many policy code changes, and again, this was mostly in a reactive function this year. Just to name a few, we had updates to the stormwater code, state-mandated changes to the shoreline code, state-mandated changes to the wetland and habitat code, state-mandated changes to the floodplain ordinance. We also looked at various local changes to things in the initial biennials, including setbacks for eaves and gutters, the cottage code, road modifications, calculations of density, and others. One other item with the early involvement on policy change is DEEB also had invited Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife early on in 2022 to come as a guest, and David Howe and his team came and presented things that were going on there. And we viewed that as a really positive thing, sort of DEEB reaching out beyond the county's jurisdiction, but to the state jurisdictions that are requiring changes to code to better understand where things were headed in their manner, so collectively the private sector and public sector could get ahead of things. And I know for a fact WDFW really appreciated that dialogue and continues welcoming that, especially as the county's moving forward with the comprehensive plan update. And understanding how to harmonize both the needs of developing land for population and jobs, but as well as the natural environment. And then the final action that we really accomplished in 2022, again, I've used from sort of a reactive mode, was reviewing changes on just various county plans, and this included the 179th Access Management and Circulation Plan, other changes to county code, the Transportation System Plan, the 2022 School Capital Facilities Plans. We continue to have ongoing discussions with county staff in terms of reducing the permit center wait times, and we continually get updates from staff on the challenges with hiring down there for those positions to make sure that permits are being processed in an expedited fashion. We did get information that the council decided to suspend annual reviews while the GMA update was taking place, and so we're aware of that. we went through the traffic impact fee update, and then finally, as well as the traffic improvement program update in 2023 through 2028. So those are a set of the accomplishments that we undertook last year. And before I turn it over to Seth again, you know, I would like to remind the council that DEEB is our professionals. We're here to make things better for our community, and we normally this meeting has been done in a little bit less formal setting in the work session room, kind of a more dialogue approach where we have a little bit more give and take with council. And again, we would just want to invite council to provide us direct guidance on things that you guys would like to see, because I do know for a fact our people remain willing, ready, and able to serve the county in whatever capacity the council sees fit in terms of policy. So with that, I'll turn it over to Seth.
Good morning. So with regard to the 2023 work plan, you know, we've prepared this draft plan and really look for the councilors' input on if there's specific items and priority of those items. We obviously have, you know, several months into the 2023 year. We've had 4 meetings already this year. Our most recent April meeting was held just a couple of weeks ago. We were pleased to see a couple of the councilors also attend that meeting. It's always great to be able to, for the background discussion that takes place in those. And we've also, as I believe Jamie mentioned, in the previous years prior to COVID and going virtual, we saw that interaction with the councilors at the DEEB meetings as well. The first item on this plan is, as Jamie mentioned, it's a reactive item, but the 2025 comprehensive plan update, it has many components to it. And the first item that I had noted on here was with regard to the population and employment projection. And really the population portion of that was discussed a couple of weeks ago at DEEB. We made a recommendation to council as part of our meeting. And I know there has been a public hearing with council, and I believe that was also continued for further discussion in early May. My understanding is also that the employment portion of that will be upcoming, and DEEB is, I guess, eager to also weigh in on those items. Comprehensive plan designations, urban growth boundary, capital facilities, all of these items are updates that are included with that comprehensive plan update, and each one has unique aspects in which the DEEB board can provide input in terms of, you know, seeing it, how these policies from the comprehensive plan are implemented in the development of our community. And so I believe that this board has a unique perspective there that can be very helpful in consideration. The second item I've listed here is with regard to the Parks Department and allowing pocket parks, trails, and other park improvements as park impact fee creditable. This was an item that was discussed prior to COVID, and it was making good progress. I believe the Parks Advisory Board also made recommendations to council. However, with the pandemic, there was other priorities, I guess, and this was sidelined. Earlier this year, we had Rocky Houston present to us, and we had a great discussion back and forth on how this could be moved forward and potentially implemented. There's a lot of opportunity here in a manner in which we can, through the development community, there can be improvements made in which meet the county's goals with regard to providing parks and open space amenities to the public. And and as a way to incentivize that, these park impact fee credits are, you know, essentially there because these facilities are being created, constructed by the private developers. There's obviously less of an impact on the need for a public facility. So that was one of the items that we'd like to, you know, wanted to put as a higher priority to hopefully get that pushed through. Another item here is the biennial code amendments changes. The first round of that is beginning. We have a couple of more weeks in which to provide suggestions to county staff before that progresses. DEEB will, those items that are collected for the biennial updates, those are also provided to DEEB as part of the process for review and input. And I believe, like Jamie said, we're really the boots on the ground in how this code is implemented in development within the community. And so we have a unique aspect or perspective on that. A few of the specific items that we've had discussions on is within the mixed use zone and those design guidelines. There's some items that were put in there with regard to townhomes, floor area ratio. I don't want to get too much into the details, but essentially when those guidelines were put together, there's some unintended consequences with that make it prohibitive to be able to do townhomes or have a home that's large enough. And I guess there's just it impacts the middle housing that there is a severe lack of in this community. Gross floor area with regard to cottage developments, recreation space, landscape space, and medium and higher density residential districts. Jamie mentioned that as one of those items that came about as a new interpretation from county staff. And so our goal is to work through that and ensure that it's updated and that the policy portion of it can be, you know, appropriately approached. Number 4, working with county staff to identify business processes that can be streamlined, reduce redundancy, better use of county staff time. One of those is, I think it's a great idea that the City of Vancouver uses as a streamlined process in which you can combine your preliminary site plan review with construction document review. Essentially, it's utilized often with, you know, commercial industrial development, which is when we see clients come in, they're always interested in how long does this process take to get this development going? How soon can I occupy this building? And that part of it, the city does a really great job in which they condense the review instead of a 78-day review followed by another 3+ months. We often see it taking a year to get that process approved in the county. The city condenses that into a 90-day process, and I just, you know, feel like as a board, we think that would be something that would be great to be implemented. This county did explore something that was kind of a take on that, but it was not, it was never followed through on, and so it had some specific items within the process that made it where there was too much risk put back onto the developers, and so it was not ever utilized. Review of the road mod committee findings. There's been discussion on whether there's specific items that the road modification review team, whether there's specific items that they repeatedly review and there's always approval on it. Obviously, if there's changes that can be made to code to minimize or avoid unneeded reviews, we want to try to help implement those. Also looking at thresholds for type 1 versus type 2 processes, the single family stormwater review process improvement, that's been an ongoing topic, which has been revisited numerous times, and I think, that bears continued monitoring. Working with county staff to implement the findings from the Housing Advisory Board. This is an item which is moving forward. We had an initial introduction to this at our last meeting with further discussion to occur in a couple more weeks. So cottage housing requirements, there's been some discussion about how we can help to improve that to better meet market demands. Mixed use, I touched on that a little bit earlier. Any working with county staff for updating code to implement these findings. Incentives for infill developments. Monitoring the work that the City of Vancouver has done. Obviously, where there's policies or procedures, code that's been implemented in other areas that is successful, we want to use that wherever possible. So we're working to, many of us on the DEEB committee are also active in other jurisdictions within the area, and I think that's something that we bring back to the board and, as an opportunity for discussion. We want to work with county staff on items that are currently or likely to keep supplies constrained. We've seen that in different areas. At first it was power transformers, then it was street lights. There's just different items that seem to arise, which, doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason behind why a specific item is becoming an issue, but county staff has worked with us closely on when other items came up in order to allow the development to continue. Maybe it's through posting of a bond or something like that. Item number 7, I'll work with county staff to identify items that could be changed to reduce development timelines. Concurrent review of engineering on infill developments. Consideration was whether there'd be an opportunity to implement like a pilot project in which you could have a master engineers list. This is something that is, I guess, is a way for the county to improve their timelines in review and providing feedback. Identify items where consultants that consistently meet an agreed upon benchmark, they can earn reviews that are a one-time review. Essentially, this is a way to identify, so that if there's specific consulting teams that are meeting benchmarks, that we don't have them subjected to the same level of review as others. My understanding is that there's another jurisdiction to the north that does have a process like this, and it was something that we thought as a board would be great if there is an opportunity to use that. Monitor the use of E-plans and LMS and providing input for improvement. So there's been some challenges with the implementation. I believe it's starting to become more streamlined, and there's, with the consultants that work both in City of Vancouver closely with the E-plan system there, and then the Clark County's use of the E-plan software, there's different areas where potentially improvements could be made. Number 8, continue to monitor past improvements, celebrating that success or if there's further improvements needed. Number 9, look for areas that county requirements are higher than code and attempt to reduce staff time and or reduce costs, which impact affordability. That was the 9 items that we had identified, but we'd be happy. I don't know, Jamie, if you have any additional items or the rest of the board, but we'd be happy to hear input from council.
Just one other item, and this is the thought that occurred to me as Seth was going through his stuff. And I'm not sure how much familiar council is with the land development process, but land development has a bunch of regulated categories, and those regulated categories oftentimes fall into certain like silos, and often those silos sort of compete with one another. And I think part of our job in the private sector working with the county is to find ways to simplify and harmonize those different various needs of code, because sometimes one code, for instance, on stormwater says the exact opposite you want to do with the roads in order to accommodate like fire trucks, for instance. And so we're really just trying to find common sense here and try to harmonize that as the best we can. And I wanted to pick on another jurisdiction across the river, of course, as an example of, I think, where things go awry when you don't have something like DEEB in place. In particular, in the city of Portland, was engaged in a project where and I think it's just really a function of how their governance is set up presently, but you had the Bureau of Transportation on one hand demanding something of our client, with Bureau of Development Services demanding the exact opposite of our client. In that instance, we basically had to play family therapist between two departments, and that's really not what we view as our role in the consultant world, is to try to get two bureaus together, but really, again, trying to find ways in code to make sure that things make sense practically, that they're harmonized, and that we can actually try to accomplish both goals, but do it in a mindful manner, understanding that there's competing needs out there. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to add at this point, or are you ready for some dialogue from council?
I think we really welcome the dialogue and questions, and our esteemed colleagues are also here to provide assistance. That's
great. There's one thing that I've always been wanting to say in a group setting, and this is the opportunity, right? So, you all, James and Seth and others, identify yourself as professionals. Absolutely. That's kind of the point of DEEB, right? And we acknowledge that, appreciate it, utilize it, and thank you for the contribution, plural, that you make as professionals to the community. It's incredibly important. Secondly, you say that your purpose is to make things better for the community. Absolutely. We know that. We appreciate that, and you do a great job of it. All we need to do is be able to dialogue and listen more and incorporate more and, just make it happen, because we know that that's what you're trying to do in a little bit different way than what council is trying to do. But we both have, I'm sure, the same objectives. One of the things that I've always felt, and I didn't know about this informal meeting that you mentioned that was of yesteryear or last year or whenever, that would be a really good idea, except again, it is so limited in duration and time. And I've often wondered, and I've said this and nobody else has picked up on it. And if nobody else does, that is absolutely fine, because this is not a council of one. It's a council of all of us. And that is that, why in the world do DEEB and the county council not have an ongoing relationship in terms of a liaison? We have that kind of relationship with, I don't know how many organizations in the community, 33, 44, I don't know. Kristen could tell us exactly, but it's a lot. And we attend those meetings regularly and keep in touch. And that just seems to me like something that would be very, very helpful. It would involve an appointment. of a person from council who would be willing to commit to that for a year or so. But if anyone is interested in that, I'm certainly interested in pursuing that as a dialogue, but not as a solo. So, my thoughts.
Yeah, I'll just make one observation, Chair Bowerman. I think, yeah, the prior reviews such as this had occurred, I think primarily prior to COVID, had occurred in the work session room, and it was more of an informal dialogue. I think that the change in county governance has also impacted this a little bit more. In the prior years, when it was the county commission form of government and we had 3 full-time commissioners, we had pretty much full attendance from, well, I wouldn't say like every month, but a lot of months we had every commissioner at our meetings. And I think since the change of this over to the council form of government, that's changed a little bit. And obviously, I think with the pandemic, that's probably also pushed things out again. But we always welcome counselors to attend our meetings, to listen and provide dialogue as you guys need be. And we would really welcome that opportunity to have a direct council liaison with our board.
We're limited to 2 in attendance at any particular meeting, as you probably know, with this new charter arrangement that you allude to. So it is different.
Yes.
Other comments from council?
Chair, I have one comment. I look forward to going to the next DEEB program. There was a quorum issue at the last meeting, so just a heads up, I will be at the next one.
Thank you.
Chair, if
Yes,
I
go
could.
ahead.
First of all, I just want to thank you. I recognize this is a significant amount of time that you contribute, and your expertise is definitely valued. I think we could talk about a lot of this stuff for really hours. And so I'll just maybe hit on a few things. I think related to the public's understanding of what the DEEB is, and all of the meetings are open to the public. Are they recorded?
Yes, they're recorded.
People can access that information. So, for example, if multiple counselors want to hear your deliberations, they're able to do that, and likewise with the public. And the public can attend, and I know I attended the last meeting. There was a member of the public there, and there was some dialogue back and forth that I think was of value. So I would just encourage people to engage in that way. A lot of the things on your list, with the comp plan update, we're going to be dealing with so much. I was happy to see the Parks Department, the pocket parks and the trails, all of that listed high on your list. And actually, in my mind, related to the landscaping, because I felt, we may not agree on what happened there, but that it was a larger policy issue that was worth considering. And I think landscaping, I could see that tie into your number 2 there, and figuring out, maybe the expectation is too much on the development community, and maybe there's more that on the public end we can do, especially with multifamily and housing density increasing, that we make sure that the livability is not sacrificed in the process. And I know everyone's resources are limited, but I think there's opportunity with a comprehensive plan update to integrate the parks, talk about the landscaping and recreational area related to multifamily. I think there's opportunities there. Generally, I have heard from some community members concern about, that maybe this is just self-serving, and that there can be tension between
sort of public benefit versus a particular industry's benefit. And so that's something to weigh through all of this. And what's in the back of my mind thinking about that is related to an additional thing we're going to be dealing with the comp plan update, and that's climate change as an additional goal. So it's not on your list, but it'll be a lens that we'll be looking at things. So I would just suggest that would be your advice on that realm would be helpful. And I think, I've noticed that there are some openings coming up on the DEEB, and, maybe there's some particular expertise in that realm that could be helpful. I think it's very valuable that you can look at other jurisdictions and see what they're doing and what's working, what's not working, and bring that to the county. Related to housing affordability, again, there's, I know at the last meeting financing came up, and the footprint of the house and the smaller ones, there were financing issues, which I don't understand, but I think would be worthwhile to explore what those barriers might be. I know you're not in banking, but if we can get around some of or what it would take to get around some of those barriers to have a smaller footprint, because I think affordable housing is, we're in a crisis mode really, and as people are priced out of rental units, it just fuels the homeless population. So it's critical that we figure out ways to build that missing middle, and whatever we can do. I think it really involves all of us stepping up and looking really what is in the public's interest and good on that score. Let's see. So financing. And then aggregate. One thing related to aggregate, I know that we'll be looking at that as part of the comp plan, and there's individual proposals that are out there, and changes, kind of sweeping changes on what's required to get those things permitted. One thing I'd be interested in, because this has come up in some of the meetings I've gone to in the communities where aggregate mining is being proposed, is the Yakima Nation and outside of the county where those aggregate sources are, and if there's, and I don't know what the price points are, but looking at do we need to find all of the aggregate we need within the county? Are there outside sources that could be comparable or maybe even better? It'd be good to look at that, because I think some of the sites for aggregate mining, there's conflicts with environmental concerns. So I think if that's avoidable, that would be good. So I appreciate what you're doing. I expect we'll have a lot of conversations going forward. It'll be very interesting. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Chair? Chair?
Yes, I thought you were wanting to go right ahead and speak.
Sure. Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you. I would like to piggyback off a lot of the comments that Councilor Marsh has made.
Oh my goodness, Counselor, I apologize. I thought you were Jamie Housley. I didn't catch the voice correctly. Excuse me.
I think the only
Counselor,
difference is I don't have glasses on, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Well, and I've got a lot of hair.
That's right. Okay, so I just would like to thank you, because you do, in more ways than just the DEEB. I've seen you guys in multiple locations. You give a lot of your time for this community to try to make things better, and I appreciate that. And you provide something that us as a council cannot really comprehend, because we are not the boots on the ground in the development of housing in our community. So I really appreciate that perspective that you bring to the table. It's something that we can't get anywhere else. It's kind of like if you're sick, you go to the doctor. You don't go to an attorney, you go to a doctor because that's what he specializes in. And kind of a little further in that analogy, I think it's important that we have trust in our community between everybody as much as possible. You need to be able to trust your doctor when you go to him for information, and have faith that he's not going to intentionally make you sick so that he can collect more money, right? And I want to address something that I have experienced prior to my being elected and since I've been there, and that is that there's a lot of contention and some distrust among this group. And I would like to address that because I believe that this group is looking out for the good of our community as a whole. But I also feel like there's always danger in not involving other points of view in our decisions. And that was part of what led me to be supportive of polling the rec landscape to begin with, because I wanted a real holistic conversation. You guys, your expertise is making housing efficiency, which we have an affordability and housing crisis, so you're able to help us fix that. But in all policy, there's always little bits and pieces that if you miss, you don't end up with the best policy. And there's often times where you can make small adjustments that have very little impact for one thing, but a very large impact for another. And so first of all, there's two things that I would like to work on. One, affordable housing and smaller buildings. How can we change our structure in any way? How can we change it to make those things pencil out? Because I know there are those barriers, there are those things that your footprint's the same, so you might as well create more space. That extra square footage costs very little. How can we change the system? Because right now, it's incentivizing bigger buildings. How can we change it to where it incentivizes more of a mixture to create more affordable housing? I would love a list of things that we here on the local level can change. There's a lot that we can't, because a lot of it's governed by state rules and stuff, but if I could get a concise list of things that we could do, I would love to look into that. And the second thing is I would like for you to help maybe suggest a way that we can include a little bit more discussion, a little bit more different viewpoints. What I get frustrated as a policymaker is when we have this building full of people. That's not what frustrates me. I love it. But it's frustrating when I hear this and I hear this, and they are so far from each other that I'm stuck to try to figure out where do I land on this. And I think part of that can be fixed with discourse, with discussion, and having more involvement. And I witnessed it in what I would consider a very polarized group. It was a part of a committee on bike lanes that went down in front of our house on Columbia Street. And I witnessed a group that came in that was extremely polarized, that by the end of our discourse over time, we had developed a relationship of trust with each other. Now, we still disagreed to some degree, but we now understood more why, what it was behind why that person felt that it needed to be this way or that it didn't need to be. So I just think that people with different viewpoints working together, you can come up with a better solution, and it leads towards more trust. And so I would be grateful if you guys could put your mind together and consider ways that we can increase that participation and help develop that trust and that working together. I think that's all of my comments. Like I said, I cannot say enough about how much I appreciate what you do, and you do it for free. It costs you your time with your families, and I really appreciate that. Anybody that's willing to step up and sacrifice their time for our community is an asset to our community. So thank you.
Very good. And if there are no other comments at this time or questions from council, I would just ask for if there are any concluding remarks otherwise, and then we could close the session and move on.
Council, Eric Galima, member of the DEEB. I did want to
Hi, Eric.
mention
Yes,
one.
go ahead.
I wanted to touch on one thing from being on the board pretty close to its inception, just how it's changed over time. And I also want to comment a little bit about just kind of closing as what we can do better as a advisory board and in our interaction with council. So historically, we've been a valued partner of staff, council, and the public. Staff has used us and as basically cover. We run things by each other. We work collaboratively. And I would argue that we do not advocate for our own best interest. A lot of times we advocate for things that better serves the public, that is not necessarily in our best interest, but it's just a good idea. And we come to that conclusion by working closely with staff, with the community, and with council. One thing I want to stress is that we are your advisor for these types of issues. And over the last few years, I think it started kind of with COVID, with staff changes, with just kind of a change of how business is done. But we used to have a seat at the table at work sessions, at council meetings, because we are your advisor. What's happened recently, I think, over time, is that our message is now being conveyed with just a memo, or it's being filtered through staff, and it's not as effective as it used to be. I can give you a few examples, but I really don't want to get into the minutia right now. What I want to do is focus on what we can do better. And that is that when decisions are made, and especially if there is a disagreement between staff and your advisor, we should have a seat at the table at those work sessions. Instead of staff presenting our position, we should be presenting our position. That's why we're here. We have valuable data. And then your job as legislators is to take both those things and the public and then to make the decision. It's not just, we don't expect you to take always our position, but we do want the opportunity to advise you on what the adverse impacts of some of these decisions are. And you can decide. Unintended consequences is a big thing we focus on the DEEB. So many times, good intentions have unintended consequences. And we're in the trenches. We are your people in the trenches that work with us every day, and we're your resource. So what I would say is to get back to what we used to do and to be more effective and to better serve you, we should be more involved. And I think Council Bowerman touched on it, that we shouldn't just have one meeting that we talk to you. We should be invited to work sessions that involve development issues. One example just recently is we had a whole meeting and spent a lot of time on the growth rate. We provided a recommendation. That recommendation almost didn't make it to staff. We did have to, I think it got to staff maybe a half an hour before the meeting, probably not enough time to really take it into account. So I'm glad that it did get continued and you guys are able to take a look at the memo we provided. But also, because we're your advisor, not the public, the 3-minute time limit, we should be able to be part of the presentation like staff is. You should be able to bounce questions off of us. We should be able to respond to you guys in a public setting, so it's all out in the public so they can hear the positions. And I think that's how it used to be, and I'd like to get back to that so we can better serve you. That's pretty much all I had, but I just wanted to kind of bring it back to what we used to be, what we can do to be better. And thank you again for letting us serve you.
And if I could just add really quick, when you're talking about the process, which I think is important discussion for council and staff, to also, I would ask of you guys to also continue to work through April, as she is the one that's designated on the interpreting code, because there have been a few times where things have bumped up to council when April wasn't consulted with prior. So we want to make sure that you're also getting supported by staff so that we can do it in the most effective way. Thanks.
It's all about effectiveness, isn't it? I believe that this has been very productive. Thank you to DEEB for your advice on our own processes together, as well as the advice that you normally give. And so unless there is something else for the good of the order, I would like to call this work session to a close. Is there anything?
Thank you.
Hearing that, I'm sorry?
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, because I hope you get the message after hearing all of us say it, how much your professional input and time is appreciated. So with this work session, we will now bring this to a close. And